Welcome to Corporate Law Lab. I'm Neil Taylor, host of the podcast and director of the Corporate Law Center at the Donald P. Klekamp, University of Cincinnati College of Law. All of those words are not in the correct order, but at least they're all there. Our guest today is Austin Stevenson of Strauss Troy. Welcome.
Thank you.
And we're also joined by Faith Howard, who is a rising 3L. Congratulations on getting through 2 out of 3 years, and a summer associate at Strauss Troy.
Yes, thanks.
Okay. Let's get started. Where are you from originally, Austin?
I'm from Wheelersburg, Ohio, which is going to be a common answer in this room.
Oh, for sure. We have a lot of Wheelersburg people. Where's Wheelersburg?
We've got 2/3 of the people in this video right now, which is a fun fact. It's about 2.5 hours east of here. Closest town is Portsmouth on the Ohio side. So middle of Appalachia, right on the Ohio River.
I lived in Ashland, Kentucky for 5 years as a kid, so I'm sure I've been to Wheelersburg. just didn't know it. Well, sounds good. So you get the where did you go to high school question here in Cincinnati?
Every time.
Yeah.
Every time. Yeah. And people very quickly realize they don't have any common ground with me at all whatsoever. Yeah.
All right, Faith, you're going to take over the start of Austin's path, and then we'll talk a bit more about what he does at Strauss Troy. This, for those that are keeping track, this is part of our Deal Lawyers series, and should be fun. So take it away, Faith.
Yeah, let's get going. So where did you go to undergrad and what was your major?
So I went to Northern Kentucky University, right across the river. And I was originally going to be an education major. Ended up switching to political science when I decided that I was going to go to law school, because the way the courses were set up, I could get done a little bit earlier if I did political science and save a semester or two of tuition money that way. Whereas if I stuck with education, you had to do the student teaching and you had to do all the practical stuff, and it was just a little too rigid. So started off with that and then switched to political science by the end.
Nice. So what made you decide that you wanted to pursue law instead of education?
I made a decision completely on paper based on no real world experience whatsoever. I originally wanted to teach just because we're from a small town. There's only so many things to do, right? You could work at the hospital, you could work in a school somewhere, or you could do something like what my dad and grandfather did. My dad was a welder. My grandfather worked for AK Steel, more blue collar jobs. Didn't want to work at a hospital. I have zero aptitude to do anything with my hands whatsoever. So if I would have tried to work any blue collar jobs, I would have just been fired repeatedly over and over again. And so I decided to teach. And then whenever I moved up here, you just get exposed to different things. You see different career paths. There's nobody in my family that are lawyers. And so that was never something that had really crossed my mind. But you just slowly start to get acquainted with more opportunities. And when I decided I didn't want to teach, I just tried to think through, what do I think I would be good at? What do I think I would like? And what do I think has a clear enough path to earning a good living that I think I could feasibly do? And for me, I decided that going to law school was the best way to do that, at least on paper.
Yeah. So did you decide that you wanted to go straight through, or did you take any time off in between?
No, I went straight through. I was pretty convinced that if I stopped going to school, I would not want to go back. And now that I've been out for a couple of years, I'm even more sure that that's the case. Even though I loved undergrad, and I love law school, but I went straight through. So I did. I did NKU in 3 years, and then I had my 3 years law school. So,
did you know any lawyers that you were like, oh, I see that lawyer, I could do that?
No, absolutely not.
Okay,
absolutely not. I mean, when I was an undergrad, I met just from. Like I said, my major was political science. So I did some political work and I did some community work and that kind of thing. And so I met and got to know several lawyers, but not in their capacity as lawyers, if that makes sense. So
none of them that you were like, oh, I see what that.
I want to be like that.
I wish I could be that guy.
There was none of that. It was strictly just it was a very objective way of looking at it. I just thought, what could I do that I think I would be good at? And if I do this, then this will happen. And if I do that, then that will happen. And I thought going to law school was that answer, because I had it in my head that, if I'd done enough research that I felt like, well, if I go to a decent school and I get good grades, there's a clear path to do this or this, so that was it.
Nice. So where did you attend law school?
I went to UK, University of Kentucky in Lexington, and lived down there for 3 years.
Nice. So how did you decide on UK?
So I grew up a huge UK fan, sports. So grew up going to basketball, football games with my grandfather, Pap, as we called him. And so I'd always wanted to go there. But because I lived on the Ohio side of the river, I was going to be out of state. And, I said originally I wanted to be a teacher. You can do the math on paying out of state tuition, to be a teacher. The math doesn't really work. And so, NKU had a metro rate originally, which was, you could basically pay in state, even if you were out of state, if you were within a certain band of counties. But by the time I graduated from NKU, I had never moved back home, even over the summer. So I had established residency, and, it was a pretty quick decision.
Nice.
You know,
So
as an IU grad, we'll have to forgive your choice of, but at least you went someplace for undergrad that we can beat
You can
in
be,
basketball.
you can sit with. Well,
Yeah.
that's
We used to be able to occasionally beat you in basketball, but I don't think they even play each other anymore.
so they played last year. They played for the first time in a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
first time since 20. I know they played in 2012, but 12 or 13.
I don't remember us winning any games because we're a football school now, so we don't.
That's
talk
right.
about
That's
basketball
right. I
anymore.
wouldn't even bring anything else up if I were you. I would have probably led with that if I were you.
We had somebody on that went to Notre Dame, and I asked him why he went to the school with the second best football program in Indiana. He didn't like that.
What do
so
you
much, but
say?
it was fun.
There's no answer to that.
He said, "Oh, so we're going to do that, are we?" Anyway,
Yeah.
but I got my UC hat on today for my other alma mater. All right, I'll stop interrupting with sports.
No,
but-
it's okay. I like the sports talk. So if I remember correctly, you told me once that you went to law school during part of the pandemic.
I did.
How was that?
So my last, if you want to see peak levels of motivation, I was a 3L in my last semester, living at home during the pandemic, and we just went to pass fail. So I was really motivated to finish strong last semester. Didn't retain a whole lot of information from that last semester. My wife and I had also gotten married in between my 2 and 3 year, and we'd never lived together before. So add that on top that we had never lived together before, and then we went to it's a pandemic. Not only you live together, you can't leave, and so there was a lot. It was an interesting time, the spring of 2020.
Nice.
Yes, lockdown's a great way to start a marriage.
Yeah, because it's because we lived. She stayed up here whenever I went to Lexington. She was working downtown for Price Waterhouse at the time. So she stayed up here doing that, and then we went from we're in 2 different cities to here's the same home. Hope you like it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then adding on top studying for the bar that summer with all that going on was also ideal.
Nice. So were there any classes that you took in law school that kind of maybe prompted your decision to go into transactional work or maybe inspire you to be a deal lawyer?
Not directly, and so when I started at Strauss, so I've been at Strauss Troy my whole career, so I'm coming up on 6 years. When I started at the firm, I did not start down the transactional path. I started I started in 2020, and we're a mid-sized firm. We've got about 60 lawyers, and so when I started, I was doing a little bit of everything. Because you had a strange mix of most people were at home, some people were in the office. I was in the office most of the days, but with my door shut. So you kind of just ended up taking work from whoever had it because everybody was just kind of all over the place because everything was new. And so I didn't start doing transactional work. I started doing a little bit of everything. And whenever I was in law school, part of the reason why I was doing a little bit of everything was when I was in law school, I didn't have any indication that I wanted to do transactional work. I thought I wanted to litigate. I really liked public speaking whenever I was an undergrad. I emceed all the NKU men's and women's basketball games, so I did all of our on-court ad reads and promos, that kind of thing. So I was really comfortable speaking publicly, and so I thought that's what I wanted to do. And then I got exposed to litigation in real life and realized that wasn't the case very quickly.
What did you not like about it that turned you away from it?
Slow, adversarial, overly adversarial. A lot of Pyrrhic victories, right? You get all the way to the end, you win, right? You win, but at what cost? And so it just wasn't. It wasn't a good fit for my personality. It wasn't a good fit for what I wanted to do. I didn't like how long it drug on for, and that kind of thing. But no specific classes. Although now looking back on it, in the back of my head, I liked all my tax courses a lot. I took 3 or 4 tax courses at UK, even though at the time I didn't have a really reason to, other than I just wanted to be exposed to it. I'm married to a CPA, so maybe somewhere in the back of my head that factored into at least wanting to be conversational at the dinner table. But But I looking back, I did enjoy all my tax classes. I enjoyed we called it business associations. You guys, I don't know what you guys call it here.
Same.
Yeah, so I enjoyed that. In the moment, I didn't realize that I liked all those classes, but looking back on it, I kind of think, well, maybe that made sense.
Yeah, I was talking to one of the corporate attorneys at Strauss the other day, and I told him, I said, I know what an LLC is. I'm sure I can help out.
Yeah, and I remember at the time thinking that, especially with those tax classes, people would, I think, build them up in their head to be this insurmountable thing because everybody's programmed to think that they're afraid of numbers, right, whenever you go to law school. But I never felt that way. I thought Tax 1 was interesting. I thought the state and local was interesting. I took corporate tax. I thought that was interesting. So looking back on it, there was probably some foreshadowing, but I certainly didn't know it at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So why Cincinnati? Was it because your wife was already
100%.
here?
Yeah, 100%. So she's from Northern Kentucky, born and raised, been here her entire life. And I was always going to move back up here. Yeah. Yeah. So whenever we did our summer, interviews and that kind of thing, I interviewed with firms up here. I mean, I interviewed with firms in Lexington too, in Louisville, and because that's just what you do, right? You talk to everybody. But I was actively trying to come back up here.
And did you clerk at Strauss before you?
I did.
Okay.
I did. Yeah. In my 2L year, I did a full summer.
How was the summer program? Was it? I mean, we can ask Faith too how the summer program compares to. True.
So it's. I was by myself. You were not by yourself. We have two summer clerks, both from UC, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I remember I did a lot of government work that summer. We have a big municipal practice at the firm. We represent, Lord knows how many cities, municipalities, quasi-governmental entities, and they always have things going on, council meeting, records requests, et cetera, et cetera. So there's always something you can kind of pitch in on. So I did a lot of that. I helped out with some domestic work, domestic relations work. I went to a full trial for a divorce at one point. That was an experience. And so I did a lot of that kind of thing. I did a lot of general litigation. I did almost no corporate work my summer. And I think looking back on it, at the time, almost all of our corporate lawyers were in our Kentucky office, which is where I'm predominantly in now. I'm mostly there. And I was in the Ohio office as a summer clerk. And so I got over there some, but, I was in Ohio 4 or 5 days a week and maybe in the Kentucky office 1 day a week. So I did almost no corporate work. So.
Do you think it's harder? I mean, it seems to me that it would be to find good corporate work that you can give in bite-sized portions for somebody that's only going to be there.
Yeah. So I feel that way. I feel that way now completely. Yeah. Like, I mean, I've had a couple deals that have kind of started to get warmed up or that I've gotten in the door and I know they're coming, but they're in various stages. And by the time a summer clerk leaves, it's too late. Right. So I may get a deal in June and know that it's probably going to go somewhere. But by the time they get through some initial due diligence, some financial due diligence, and it really gets time to start putting documents together, reviewing legal due diligence, and doing that kind of thing, the clerk's probably gone by that point. So it is hard. And I think it's very hard to give discrete pieces of transactions to folks. I mean, you can always say, hey, here's a template bill of sale, retrofit it to be for this. You can always do that, but you don't really get any stuff. I mean, you get a little bit of experience, but nothing substantive. Whereas, if you're doing litigation, you can say, hey, I've got this issue, and here's the issue, and here are the facts. Can you go look into X? I think it's a lot harder to do that in a deal because there's this large universe of issues. And if you don't even know the mechanics of how the documents work together, it's hard to even know why you're being asked to do X, Y, or Z. And so I do think it's harder to quickly integrate.
Yeah, I had split my summer, and the first half of the summer was all litigation. And so then when I came back to the other firm and I said, can I get some exposure to corporate work because I've done all litigation? And they gave me some, but my impression at the end of that was that what corporate lawyers do is make copies out of the form file, right? Because there was no way to really teach me how to.
We put signature packets together.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what we do. Yeah. So I do think it's hard. And where I'm at now, I try to find ways to do that, but it's hard. It's hard. Short of just doing it all the way through. It's hard to fit that into a 2 to 3 month window.
So how early into your time at Strauss did you start working on deals?
About 1.5 years in. So
Okay.
I think it was probably, midway through 2021, late 2021, something like that. So I've been there a year and a half. And our corporate department needed some help, needed some bodies. And I was in our Ohio office at the time, but the chair of our department called me and said, hey, we'd had somebody go in-house. We'd had somebody leave town to move closer to home. And so we had some vacancies there that we needed to fill. And he said, hey, until we can get somebody in here, can you come over for just a day or 2 week, pitch in? I know you've not done any of it, but can you just pitch in? And the answer, whenever you're a first, second year associate, it's always yes, right? So,
Right.
And I was excited to do it anyway because I lived in Northern Kentucky. I live within walking distance of our Northern Kentucky office, so I was fine to go up there. But 1 day a week turned into 2 days a week, turned into 4 days a week, turned into 5 days a week, and pretty quickly realized that that's what I wanted to do. So,
Yeah, people ask me all the time. Well, they used to before I went back into academia. How do I get to be one of you? And it's like, well, I started as a litigator, just like you did. And there's not necessarily a path other than if a door's ajar, push on it, see what's on the other side. That's kind of, I don't know how many lawyers I've talked to where you say, how did you get to what you were doing? What was the plan? And so often there wasn't a plan. You try something out and you turn out to like it. It sounds like that was your experience.
Completely. And I was totally I was totally transparent with the corporate folks I was working with, but I didn't have to be because they knew I didn't know what I was doing. But I tried to I tried to be really honest about that. Anytime they asked me to do something, I was always totally fine to say, that's great, but I already know what you just said, right? Like, can you? And so I was always fine to sit down and talk to people about those kinds of things and learn why.
And it's really important to do that, to like not just be like, oh, I'll figure it out. I have no idea what they said. I'll go waste a bunch of time, figure out what it is that they're talking about when a 10-minute conversation might actually save you the 3 or 4 hours of pain of trying to figure out what the heck's going on there. Do you remember the first deal you worked on?
I do. The first deal I worked on was we were representing the seller of a regional company, based regionally. They did work nationally. They were a distributor and supplier of cleaning products, janitorial products, other things of that nature. And they were selling to a private equity backed strategic buyer that was in the industry that was going around and consolidating, for lack of a better term. They were picking off different acquisition targets and things like that. It was kind of a similar situation. They were about halfway through the deal whenever I started working on it. And they got into a spot where the only way to get the deal done in the amount of time they needed to get it done was if they brought some more bodies on. And I was one of those bodies. And so I came in working on disclosure schedules, reviewing the diligence, reviewing the data room. And that was kind of the initial ask, hey, can you help us put the disclosure schedules together? And I said, yeah, as soon as you tell me what the disclosure schedules are, I'll get right on working. I'll get right on that, right? And so that's kind of how I started.
So what was the time pressure coming from the PE firm, or was your client just anxious to get done?
I honestly, I was so low level, I don't even know. Well, all I knew was that we needed to get it done by X date, and that was all I needed to know at the time. So yeah, it was. I don't even know what it was driven by. I have looking back on it, I don't know if it was an arbitrary deadline or if it was a real deadline or what it was. But
so you liked it enough that you wanted to keep doing it,
Yeah.
and so. Were the kind of deals that you then continue to work on similar to that, where you've got like a founder entrepreneur selling to a PE firm or someone doing a roll up?
That's right. I've been on the other side of those a lot. So I do a lot of transactions with first time sellers that have been in their company for their whole life, or it's been in their family for multiple generations, and for one reason or another, now is the right time to sell. And so because of that, we'll do a lot of normal deal work, right? Structuring, putting the documents together, negotiating back and forth, that kind of thing. But we also do a lot of just counseling, one-on-one, interpersonal discussions on why a buyer's asking for this, why we need to do this before we do this, because it's somebody's first time doing it, right? And they could be the most sophisticated business person, but if they've never seen a transaction before, it's a different thing. And And
And then the people on the other side do transactions for a living.
every day, all day,
Right.
multiple times a year, it's a different thing. And you've also, I always try to remind myself that, a lot of these people are, some of them are passive by the time they're selling. Some of them have a good management layer in place and they're just owning it. But a lot of them are still working in the business, and so a lot of them are, or at least the people we might be working with to get documents together or get diligence done, they're working their full-time job too. They still have to run the company while the deal's going on. And so they're wearing a lot of hats, and you just kind of have to be cognizant of that.
Do many of them expect to stay in the business after it's been purchased?
It depends on age, right? I mean, we have a lot of sellers that whenever they decide to sell, they're deciding to sell because it's time to play golf.
And the kids don't want to run the business.
That's exactly right. So we have a lot of that. But now we're doing a lot of deals that have some feature of the seller staying around, whether it's as a consultant or as an employee, or they're getting rollover equity in the new business, so they want to continue to have some sort of at least knowledge of what's going on. So everybody's different, but I have some buyers or some sellers that will tell me up front, hey, we really care about the non-compete because at some point we're going to have to do something else. And we've only been doing this for our whole lives. So we need to have, that matters more to them than somebody who's 85 and has owned the company for 50 years and just wants to be done.
Right. We were talking before we started recording. I mean, I've been on the other side of that. Like when I was in Avnet, we were constantly buying from founder entrepreneurs. And I always found that anytime, I don't think I ever ended up in litigation from one of the deals I did, but we would buy a company that had bought from a founder entrepreneur, and the litigation was always around the earnout, the employment relationship. How do you deal with those kind of expectations that an entrepreneur has of, I know how to run this business, so when these guys give me a small pile of money, they're going to continue to listen to me about how to run the business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of expectation management, and it depends on who the buyer is. But there's a lot of expectation management. I mean, I try to counsel people that, if you're the seller, you want to push as much of that cash to closing as you can, right? I mean, I don't have as negative of a view as you hear some people, sometimes people will say any dollar you get after closing, just assume you're not going to get that. That's a little doom and gloom, I think, right? Like, I don't think it's that severe. But there's a kernel of truth to that, right? I mean, any dollar you don't get at closing is at least, it's contingent on something, right? Performance of the buyer, that the buyer's going to act in good faith, that they're going to continue running it properly, et cetera, et cetera. And so we'll do a lot of expectation management and just try to balance, wanting to get as much up front, wanting to take as many chips off the table as we can, with the fact that we know the buyer wants to have incentives aligned. We know, that there's going to be some element of that post closing. So how do we mitigate that? And there's plenty of ways you can do that, right? You can negotiate some management rights still, or some blocking rights for a seller. But that gets harder to do in certain situations because the buyer doesn't want to come in and be handcuffed. They may be buying it thinking they can improve upon it and do X, Y, and Z, and they don't want the seller hanging around and having employees, looking over the new owner's shoulders to look at the former seller and seeing if he approves of what's going on. So every case is different.
Yeah, I used to obnoxiously say, I'm the one making you into a millionaire, so we're going to do it my way. and you would have you'd get some traction with that of like, I'm the one that's putting out the millions of dollars.
Yeah.
It's going to be my problem if this thing doesn't work out. But that was kind of also the way I tried to avoid earnouts as the buyer. Mm-hmm. I mean, a lot of time the buyer really wants earnouts because it's a way to defer cash and maybe never spend it, in your example. But, I always found that the more I could do to just have the deal done and know that it was done, it worked for me. Yeah. I also ran litigation.
Yeah. Well, and I've got a buy-side deal I'm working on right now that I had a conversation with somebody last week that whenever we're doing diligence, we've found some things we don't like. And I proposed doing an earnout. We can tie it to revenue. We can tie it to if this, gets transferred over, laid out all the possibilities. And they're like, yeah, we know that works on paper, but we just don't really want to be dealing with this guy for any longer than we have to.
Right.
And that's a total, that's a non-monetary decision, and that's totally fine.
Yep.
Um,
So, what was the first deal that you sat in the big chair, in the first chair?
yeah, so I think my timing might be off on this, but the first one that
It's okay.
the first one that I
we
remember,
won't be
yeah,
fact checking.
yeah,
It's not.
they're going to shepherdize my
Yeah.
recruiting here. That's a word I've not said in probably 6 years. But the first one that I remember being meaningful to me was I represented a group of buyers here in town that was going around buying up hospitality businesses. So they had some bars and restaurants. They had some other, things that were ancillary to events and things of that nature. And we did 2 or 3 acquisitions for them in a year or 2 period, and I ran all of those. And it was a little bit of everything. Some of them we bought the real estate too. Some of them we didn't. Some of them we came in and totally cleaned house. Some of them we didn't. And so we went a lot of different ways within those 3. But that was the first one I remember being on start to finish. So I brought it in, I did the work, I ran the deal, and then represented them afterwards too, and just general business.
So how'd you bring in business at such a?
I do a lot of networking. I do a lot of networking. So I do a lot of, not so much now that I have a kid at home, but most of the time, the first couple of years I was at the firm, I would say if I didn't have a coffee, lunch, or a happy hour every day of the week, it was at least 3 or 4 days a week. So I was a big believer in taking people to lunch, going to events, meeting people, following up, getting coffee with them. I felt like that was a good way to quickly start to generate some things without having to set aside, and maybe this is a bad example because I love to play golf, but without having to set aside, all right, I'm going to go take this guy to play golf for 4 or 5 hours. You can't really do that with your second or third year associate, right? But you can meet somebody for coffee before you come into work. Everybody has to eat lunch. You can go to lunch for an hour. So I started doing that at a pretty early age, and the firm was extremely supportive of that, and still is.
A lot of law students, when you say the word networking, they recoil in horror, and they think that what you're talking about is standing there with a drink in your hand, hoping that someone talks to you, and that the conversation is not totally forced, and that the conversation is transactional. You have something I want. How do I get it? A job. How do I get you to give me what I want, and then get to go home and not do networking anymore? How did you look at networking differently than that to get comfortable doing it, or is it just something you're always a natural at?
No, I don't want to say, I wouldn't say I was a natural at it, but it was always something I wanted to do. So I had, really early on when I was at the firm, I had somebody tell me, if you ever get to the point where you really truly have your own book and you're not relying on anybody else, that's where you really start to have freedom, right? If you've got your own work, if you've got your own practice that you're able to do yourself, then you can run it how you see fit, within reason, right? You just have a lot more freedom to practice the way you want, when you want, how you want, that kind of thing. And that was really meaningful to me. I wanted to be in a spot. Obviously, I'm happy to help my colleagues and work on other things. That's totally fine. But I always knew in the back of my head that I wanted to get to be self-sufficient sooner rather than later. I thought that brought freedom, job security, longevity, all of those things. And so I started doing the networking and business development for that purpose. But I do think that's what most people think it is, right? They think, well, I got to go to this happy hour and we'll all stand around and, we'll all try to break into a conversation here or there, or maybe I'll find somebody I know that I can talk to or that kind of thing. And there's some of that, right? But it's different based on what you do. The way I do business development as somebody that's trying to bring in deal work or outside general counsel work or that kind of thing is much different than somebody who's trying to bring in estate planning work or who's trying to bring in divorce work or litigation work, right? You might be trying to network more with other lawyers who don't do that kind of work, who need to refer it out, or you may be, getting most of your work from former clients in those cases. Whereas I may be going out trying to find rooms with the right people in it that I know are decision makers and can give me deal work. So it's different based on what you want to do, and what works for me is not going to work for somebody else, and vice versa.
So if you go to a networking event, say you're at a happy hour, what's a successful event? Is it like 1 or 2 really engaged conversations, or you walk out with 25 business cards?
Yeah, I think it's the old, it when you see it.
Yeah.
adage. I don't ever go in thinking, all right, I got to do, if I do X, Y, or Z, that it's good. But you can walk out and know, like, yeah, that was a bust. Or you walk out and know, you know what, I only talked to one person, but I talked to him for 30 minutes and we're getting lunch next week. And well, that's a big success, right?
Right.
Or there might be other times where, yeah, to your point, you go and you get 10 or 15 business cards and you try to meet with all those people. And of those 10, 6 of them email you back and 4 of them you actually find a date that works for you. And then 2 of them you hit it off with, right? So I think you just got to know when you see it. But I've definitely over time realized what is an efficient use of my time versus what's not an efficient use of my time, and where I think the right places for me to be are.
Yeah, I always in my networking lecture in the externship class, I always say, if you think of networking as building your professional community over a lifetime of your career, then you will like it more than if you think of it as a transactional interaction where you're trying to get something.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't even know if that, I think you have to, everybody knows why at the end of the day, people want work from one another, right? Like that's always there. There's no reason to act like that's not there. But if you solely look at it from that perspective, then people are going to see through that and it's not going to be effective anyway, right? I mean, my experience has been that people generally, not every time, but generally want to work with people that they like, right? I mean, obviously you need to be competent, you need to be responsive, you need to be all those things, but there's a lot of really smart, competent, responsive lawyers around, right? Or at least some combination of that, right? Maybe
many have 2 out of 3.
That's right. I caught myself there about halfway through, but everybody's got some combination of that, right?
Yeah.
But if somebody likes you, that can get you a long way.
So in the initial deals that you ran, you said they were restaurants and bars generally?
That was the first 2 or 3. That's not
gotta be
not a total common theme, but that was the first couple.
That's got to be a diligence challenge.
It was. You find some things.
Yeah.
You find some things. You always have to check the liquor permit, right? How many violations are there? Are there violations right now that we need to be aware of? Well, we got to get those cleaned up, or else it won't transfer. Yeah, you learn some new things that maybe you wouldn't learn if you were, selling a tech company to a Silicon Valley startup or something.
How much did you feel ready to do it when it was you had the chance?
I would say I felt mostly ready to do it.
Yeah.
I got to a point where I felt like, okay, I know that I know the nuts and bolts. I know that I know how to talk to people. But until you're in charge of really, going from we're just talking to we've got an LOI to we've got documents to all right, we actually have to close, get all the signatures up, get the wires sent out. I knew I was ready to do the actual putting the documents together, but I was very nervous to, be the person in charge of actually getting all the signatures in hand, making sure the wires went out correctly, because I just not done it before. Just not logistically had not been responsible for that yet. And so I was a little anxious about that part, but I was lucky that I've got a good mentor at the firm who is one door down for me, that anytime I've got any sort of questions, I can always walk down and say, hey, here, I've got X, Y, and Z. I'm thinking about doing A, B, and C in response. What do you think? It's like, yeah, that can make sense. Or, well, that makes sense. Or you can do this. And I was able to sleep at night because of that, right? I was able to go and say, here's what I'm thinking about. Am I doing the right thing? And he'd say, yeah, that's the way you need to do it, or that's how I would do it. And then I thought, well, if this guy's been doing it for 30 years, if he would do it that way, then I must be doing at least mostly right.
How much should you rely on the support staff? Because I know early in my career, I discovered that the paralegals knew more about how to do my job than I did.
Yeah, more in the last year or two than the first couple of years.
Yeah.
Because I think the first couple of years I was afraid to ask for help. Not from the standpoint of I don't want to look like I don't know what I'm doing, but I just personally, I felt uncomfortable asking our administrative staff to help me. Because I felt like I was kind of at the same level they were, right? Like it didn't feel like any relationship other than that. And so I just, on a personal level, I was not comfortable delegating or asking people for help or that kind of thing. I feel totally different about that now. I mean, there's plenty of things that our corporate paralegal that comes to mind. If I give something to her, I know I'm going to get it back. It's going to be great. And I'll look at it because you have to look at it, but I could probably not look at it and have the same result because she's just that good. But I didn't know that at the And yeah, I'm certainly leaning on that more now than I was earlier.
So we always ask first deal, worst deal, best deal. So
Yeah.
let's worst, and doesn't have to be like worst result, just
Yeah.
like hardest, most
Yeah.
difficult, the one that you like, thank God that one's over and I don't have to do that
Yeah,
again.
we had a team that was doing a deal. It was in the behavioral health space here a couple of years ago, and they sold to a PE shop, and uh, the other side was so challenging to deal with, both counsel, the actual buyer, and so on and so forth. They were just so challenging to deal with on every level that by the time you got to the end of it, you kind of took a deep breath and thought, all right, I'm glad we don't have to do. And it's not because they were rude. It was more just there was a lot of disorganization. You get a lot of redundant requests because maybe the left hand didn't know what the right hand was doing, and it was just a tough slog. And for me personally, I had gotten I got back from paternity leave for our first child and started on it kind of midstream the next day. So the combination of me trying to get caught up, the other side being really challenging to deal with, having a newborn at home, all those things kind of coalescing. I don't want to call it that. I'm answering the question, what was the worst deal? But there wasn't anything wrong with it other than just my own personal circumstances made it really challenging.
Yeah, I remember like coming into the office when my first child was born and just like, can I just get 10 minutes to shut my eyes before I start?
We've got pictures of me sitting at the desk at home, and I've got her on my on my left hand. She's asleep, kind of on my shoulder. And I've got my right hand reviewing documents and kind of marking things up and doing that whole thing. So, yeah,
always fun.
Yeah.
Do you find that deals are harder when counsel on the other side is, in your opinion, not up to snuff?
Yes. Yes, 100%. I mean, I think there's two different kinds of hard, right? There's really, really good lawyers who just negotiate really hard, and it's hard because they really know what they're doing and they don't give an inch on anything, right? That's hard, but that's hard almost in a rewarding sense, right? You're going up against a true expert. A much more difficult kind of hard is somebody who doesn't regularly practice, the transactional space, to me.
Is the buddy of
he's
the golf
that's
buddy.
Right.
Back to networking. He's the golf buddy.
Yeah, it's well, my brother's got a really good friend, and
yeah,
and he said he'll do it, and then you come to find out that this is the second time he's ever done something like that, or the first time he's ever done something like that, and it's just hard because whenever you've got somebody on their side that doesn't know what market terms are, doesn't know what's standard versus what's not standard. It's hard to negotiate with that person, right? Because they can get online and look up what's standard or what's market, but it's not like there's an index of things that they can go look up and be like, oh, well, we're selling for this, and these are the circumstances, so therefore, oh yeah, that's appropriate. They can't do that, right? They don't have any. There's no way for them to check what I'm telling them as it being, accurate or what's in the market. So it's really tough. It's really tough, and you can. The old adage, time kills deals, is a real thing, right? And so the longer you go on arguing about things that you really shouldn't have to, that slows your momentum and it makes you less likely to get done. So it's tough.
Yeah, but sometimes I would find that the more I went on and argued about something, I had one deal, it was in India, where the principal on the other side would just sit there and do his emails basically all day. And he would only pay attention when I threw a fit about something.
Okay.
So I'd have to just like keep going on and on and on about something. And eventually he'd look up and go, well, what's this about? That was the only way that I got through that deal.
And I felt something similar. I think sometimes it's effective when you're dealing with something like that to just point blank say, is this something you're willing to blow this deal up over? Right. Yeah. Like, is this really it? Is whether you can, is whether we can keep our personal artwork that's on the wall or our original sign that we had hanging up out front. Is it really that important to you that those things not happen? If it is, we'll just walk away now. But if not, let's move on. Right. And so I think sometimes that can be effective to just cut through that a little bit.
So what was your favorite deal?
So my favorite deal, we did one in the somewhat recent past. We represented a transportation company that was selling to a strategic buyer out of New York City. And it was another time pressure deal. It was over the summer, and for a myriad of reasons, it had a date certain that it needed to be closed by. And we knew that going in, but that time pressure created a lot of challenges, as far as we had a lot of third party consents we had to get. We had a lot of kind of intercompany items that we had to clean up. And we just had an immense amount of time pressure on it. And that one was probably, I wasn't leading that one, but I was the number 2 on that one. And it was at the time, it was the largest deal that I'd really been substantively involved with in a meaningful way beyond just, doing a discrete piece. And I thought we got to a spot where we ended up with really good terms. I was really proud of the work we did, but more importantly, I was really proud of the time that we would turn things around in. We were really quick. We were really responsive. And we ultimately got it done. And also for kind of the opposite of the first situation I talked about, counsel on the other side was eminently reasonable, great to deal with. You could call him and he'd answer at any time, 7 days a week and vice versa if something came up. And was always really good about, yeah, we'd like to get that cleaned up, but if we can't, well, we can take care of it after closing, right? I mean, he was very, very good to deal with. And so those two things combining made it a pretty rewarding experience.
Jump in anytime you want.
Oh, that's okay. I'm just enjoying listening.
All right.
I'm taking the podcast in live, and then I'll listen back again for the extra details.
So what's your favorite part about doing M&A work?
Yeah, so I like the pace a lot. Usually people, because time kills deals, people want to get it done, right? They once you have a deal in hand, it usually starts to move pretty quickly. And so I like the pace. I like that generally at the end of the day, people do want to get to the same spot. They might want to get there on different terms, right? But at the end of the day, I've got somebody that wants to sell and you want to buy it. And that can help get you a long way, right? It's not totally zero sum in that aspect. And so I like those two aspects of it. I think it ends up being a little more collaborative. Even if there's some gnashing of teeth before it gets collaborative, it does a lot of times end up being collaborative, right? Because you want to get it done. So I like those two things. I also like that you can kind of be the CEO of a deal a little bit. And so I am not an employment lawyer, and I'm not a litigator, and I'm not a data privacy lawyer, but I see all those issues on deals that come about, right? And I end up being, maybe I'm not going to be able to go a mile deep on those subjects, but I at least become aware of them and aware of what the issues you see over and over again are. And you end up knowing a lot about a lot of things because you have to be able to issue spot and know what's a problem, know when to bring an expert in. And so I like that aspect of it too. I like that you can see a little bit of everything while still having the same core process and core documents each time. You end up seeing a lot of different areas of the law.
Are you ready to be a GC then?
No,
I used to define. That's how I used to define. Well, I used to define my role as a GC as I have specialized knowledge about very few things, but I know an awful lot. I know very little about an awful lot,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And it came through the deals too,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Where you have to know enough about real estate to know when the real estate guys are fighting in a deal that I don't know how many deals we'd have to go find the real estate guys and tell them it's time to be done now. The rest of the deal's done.
Yeah. And so I think that's rewarding too. I think it's a good way to stay sharp on a lot of different topics without totally getting into the minutia of every single thing. Like I'm not going to be able to cite different, federal wage and hour statutes, book, chapter, and verse, but I know it's a problem if I've got somebody that's buying or selling for that matter, and we've misclassified people as independent contractors and they should have been employees, or we've not paid overtime properly. Well, I know that's out there. I'm not going to be the one going in and doing the calculations as far as what should have been paid, but I know it's out there because it's something that you got to make sure is taken care of.
What do you do when there's not a constant deal flow? I mean, sometimes you've got 10 deals running at once, and sometimes there's just a lull.
Yeah. So I don't do 100% deal work.
Right.
So I'll do probably 60% of my practice is transactional, and 40 or so percent is more just outside general counsel work. And so I've always got.
I told you you're ready to be a GC.
Here we go. Yeah, it was subliminally. I was thinking about that. And so I do a lot of that too. And that is always, that's a more steady, practice. Those needs are kind of continuously there. And we do that for different companies, you know, in different ways, right? There's some bigger companies that we're working with all the time. There's some that call us when they need us, and that's it. But because it's a more, you know, stable practice, I would say there's usually enough of that there to kind of keep you going. But other than that, you know, get nervous, I guess. That's a little bit of that, right? I mean, I think most lawyers will tell you that, you know, they vacillate between, oh my gosh, I've got too much to do, there's no way I'm going to get all of it done, to, oh my gosh, is the phone ever going to ring again? Am I going out of business? And a lot of times that might be in the same day or the same week, right? And so you just kind of constantly go back and forth between those two.
So what's your least favorite part of the practice?
You know, that's a good question. I think you hit on it earlier. Whenever you have somebody on the other side that is not in the space, it is really, really tough. And it's very frustrating to try to put a transaction together with somebody that's being obstinate or is taking positions that are just totally out of market, that anybody who has ever put a deal together would not ever even attempt to throw out there, right? I think that's very challenging and very frustrating. So that's probably up there towards the top of the list.
Because the client on the other side doesn't know that.
No, they don't.
Right.
Not necessarily. If I ask, you know, if I'm representing the buyer and I'm asking the seller to sign a non-compete for 5 years, right? Or X amount of years, or if I give them rollover equity and I want the right to buy it back if they do X, Y, or Z. Well, those are all totally normal things, right? But if your counsel's telling you, you know, oh my gosh, you should never agree to these. In my 40 years of practice, I've never seen this, et cetera, et cetera. Well, that's all you have to go on, because a lot of times it's your first time doing a deal too. Right. And so that it gets tough. Yeah, it gets tough. So.
And then if you get the combination of that and a founder entrepreneur that has outsized visions of what their business is really worth,
mm-hmm. you get the same problem.
Yeah.
And it kind of circles back to, you know, we were talking at the beginning of this conversation about how it's easier a lot of times to just go to somebody that's more experienced than you and say, why are we doing this, right? And that's when you pick up skills to be able to combat some of those issues, right? Because if I just look at documents, you know, I'm going to know, I'll keep using this non-compete example. I'm going to know if I look at enough documents that, oh, that's always in there. Well, if I can't articulate why that's always in there to the person on the other side, or any other term, you know, if I don't know why there's always or usually some type of indemnity cap or a basket or deductible, if I can't explain that to somebody who doesn't typically do that work, me just pointing at the document over and over again and saying, well, it's always in there, that's what market is, that's not effective in that scenario. And so you have to have enough of the why to be able to articulate that to somebody on the other side.
Right. I would get incredibly frustrated as the client when my lawyer and the lawyer on the other side, no matter how competent they were just arguing over what's market.
Yeah.
Right? Because I don't actually care which one of you is right about what market is, because it's a negotiated deal.
Yeah.
So tell me why you need this.
Yeah. And we've all done it. Right. You know, we've all said, oh, that's not what we might be right. But if it's not getting you there, it's not getting you there. I mean, I don't think I've ever had anybody say, well, that's not market, and me, you know, say, oh, you got me. You know, that's just nobody's doing it. No one's doing that.
Yeah.
But there's usually an opportunity, even if it takes a long time, to eventually get somebody there.
So if somebody, unlike me and you, who started, I spent longer in litigation than you did, but neither one of us started the practice saying corporate M&A, that's what I want to do. So other than falling into it, if a 2L approaches you and says, I think I want to be one of you one day, what should I do? Are there particular classes I should take?
Yeah.
Are there, you know, is there some regime I need to, you know, books I need to read? What do you do if you want to become in the space?
Yeah. I mean, the first thing I think of is just continue to be open to it, right? I was not open to it whenever I was in law school. I guess in the back of my head, maybe I was, but if you would have asked me, hey, what do you think about maybe doing business work or corporate work? I was like, I don't have any experience doing that. So I would say continue to be open to it, even if you have no business experience, no finance experience. Like, looking back on it, I wish I would have done, you know, accounting or finance or something like that, so I could have that set of skills in my back pocket. but I didn't. And did that mean that my learning curve was a little bit steeper? Yeah, probably. Not probably. It certainly did. But it by no means was an insurmountable, right? And the longer I've been doing it, there's a ton of deal lawyers and a ton of business lawyers out there who before they started practicing did not have any sort of business experience, right? I mean, not every business lawyer or deal lawyer is, a former Wharton finance grad, right? Like that's not everybody's experience. So I would say continue to be open to it, even if you don't have that kind of background. But on the other hand, if you do think you're open to it, look at some of those business classes. Like I mentioned tax earlier. I can't recommend that enough to anybody, even if you don't want to do business work. If you think that tax is never going to come into your practice, you're lying to yourself, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't matter if you're an estate planner, a divorce lawyer, a litigator, it's going to come up. And so it's good to know. And so I always tell people to take that, but just be open to it. Just continue to be open to it, even if it's not what you set out to do, or even if it's not what you think that your background should lead you to do.
All right. Believe it or not, we're getting close to an hour. Faith, did you have anything else you wanted to ask?
I think just knowing what time of the year it is with a lot of the on-campus interviews coming up, why do you think that 2Ls in the area should apply for Strauss Troy?
Well, you get to work with me.
Perfect. There you go.
Let's get the low-hanging fruit first, right? I'm being sarcastic for the recording. Just to be clear, I'm not that myself at all.
I think we got.
I just want to make sure. As sometimes I draft into documents for the removal of doubt, I was being sarcastic there.
Yeah.
So I love the firm. It's the only place I've been. But I think so. We're a mid-sized firm. We're 60 lawyers, and I think we have a great balance of. For me as a deal lawyer, I can work on, 50, 75, $100 million transactions and get that kind of experience. Or I can also work on smaller SBA-backed transactions that are both a buyer and a seller that have never done it before, and they just need some help. And you're representing one of them. And so I think it's a great place to have a good combination of being able to do high-end, sophisticated work and still get a lot of reps on maybe higher up the food chain as far as running deals earlier, or at least being higher up earlier because of our size. And so I think it's a good hybrid and to let you do upper, echelon, really sophisticated work while still being able to work on smaller things and learn the process and become more involved substantively on an earlier basis.
Yeah. Thanks.
So let me ask you, AI.
Mhm.
Is it part of your practice? Is it something that worries you, that you view as an opportunity? Do you think about it at all?
Yes to all those questions. Right?
Okay.
I mean, I am naturally kind of an old school person. Like I don't review anything on the computer. I print everything out. I read. I review every contract on paper. I'm bad enough at reading online that if I have an important email to read, I'll print it out and mark it up that way. It just works better that way. So I said, I'm not a very tech forward person in general, but even we have various platforms we subscribe to, and I use them on a pretty regular basis because you have to. Nobody wants to. I would say sooner rather than later, but already, clients are asking you how you're using it, and nobody wants to be in a spot where they're like, oh, well, we're looking into it, or we're thinking about it, or we're not using it. People want their lawyers to be on the cutting edge of things, I think. And so we're using it. We're trying to find a right balance between using it and still leveraging our people, right? Like anybody else is. But even in the last couple months, we've done a couple demos, couple meetings with different platforms that are specific to, for my group, for our corporate group, they're specific to transactions. And we've done some samples of those to figure out what's best for us. Kirkland & Ellis is spending $500 million to build their own, right? We're obviously not going to do that. But we are, looking for, hey, what platform can make our 8 or 10 person team function like a 15 person team? And that's kind of how we're looking at it, is how can we use it to lever up the amount of work we can do without losing equality. So that's kind of how we're thinking about it.
So the worry part, is it more than a generalized fear of tech, or?
No, it's you just don't know, right? It's just, okay. We've never seen anything advance this fast. And so who knows where it's going to be in a couple of years. I certainly don't. And so it's more just fear of the unknown.
Okay.
And I just don't know.
I mean, I do think, some of I remember I was talking to somebody who said, yeah, our clients tell us that, the first draft has got to be done by AI. We don't want to pay for you doing a first draft. And I'm like, well, nobody's ever done a first draft of saying, okay, let me see. I got to start with whereas.
You just start typing, right?
Right. Let me just start. Who are the parties? I'm going to start typing, and
You're right.
5 days and 50 pages later, I'm going to have a first draft. You always start from something.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And I think where I've ran it, I've not necessarily ran into, we want the first draft to be done that way, but I've had a lot of, hey, I took what you did and I uploaded it into, into insert your favorite software here.
Right.
And it told me X, Y, and Z. And sometimes there's things that make sense, but maybe they don't make sense for that particular situation. But then there's been other times where it's just totally off base and wouldn't have been appropriate at all. And so I get that more often, which is, people will kind of check what I'm doing against what they're and I've had people in meetings, doing that while we're sitting there, uploading things that I said to double check it while we're there. And I've had a couple other lawyers at the firm say the same thing. So that just is, it's part of it at this point.
Well, I guess we know now how the medical profession feels about Dr. Google.
Maybe so. Maybe so. Or I told you I don't think I didn't tell you, but my wife is a CPA.
Yeah.
And she's had that for a long time, but usually it's in the form of, hey, I saw on TikTok that, I can deduct X, Y, or Z. Or I saw on TikTok, if I put my baby on payroll, I can take a deduction for it. So she's been dealing with that for a little while. But it's new for us.
Sounds great. What did I miss?
I don't think you missed anything. I think we did. I think we covered a lot of ground.
You guys were spot on.
I think we covered a lot of ground. Almost right at an hour, which is pretty good.
All righty. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.